And it's time for me to introduce our next speaker, who is a landscape architect who joined the firm of Snøhetta in 2001 and since 2019 has been working on business development in the Nordic region. She's been a part of multiple projects nationally and internationally, passionately pushing the sustainability agenda within the building industry. Please give a warm welcome to Tonje Værdal Frydenlund.
Thank you. And my topic is to tell you a little bit more about how architects can be responsible of bringing sustainability to the construction industry and really spearheading the development within sustainable building. And first, a little bit about Snøhetta, where I come from. And we're an international business. We have studios all over the world, from the US, Europe, over to Asia and Pacific with Australia. And the reason for being globally present is that we've been working with projects internationally from day one. Our first project was the library in Alexandria in Egypt, which was an open competition. And having that as a kickoff for an architectural office, we thought we could do projects all over the world. We're a transdisciplinary design company. We have all the architectural disciplines. I'm a landscape architect myself, and we also have designers with product design, digital design, and graphic design as an integral part of our studio. And we work team-based. We work collaboratively with that transdisciplinary approach, and this is also something we like to do with our external collaborators and clients. We need to understand everybody's perspective to find the solutions in between our different disciplines. We don't only work with drawing, architecture, or work digitally, we also work physically. And we have a workshop in our studio space over at Vippetangen here in Oslo, where we can actually also test out and pilot and experiment with our designs to try and understand the technical parts of every project as well. And even in a workshop, we have digital tools. So we 3D print, we can laser cut, and we can also operate a 3D robot to try and test our designs and our 3D models. And going back in between digital and analog studies, change our mindsets and thinking about possible designs, and it also teaches about the physical appearance of a project. So it's testing, piloting, being curious, and through that have the mindset of continuous state of reinvention. Not just innovate, try to find new solutions, but try to base it on what you already know and see if you can tweak it a bit. Ask the questions, be curious, find a way of driving your own field. And when we talk about sustainability, that mindset is key also in how we think about what our possibilities to make a change is. And this is a small sculpture which is in Berlin. And for me, it's been really inspirational on how we should think about our role in driving the changes within sustainability. It's Isak Kodal, who's the artist behind this small sculpture, and it's called Politicians Discussing Global Warming. And to me, it tells me, don't wait. Do what you know today and try to make a change. See for every possibility of driving a sustainable change in your project. And for the industry, we have some figures that we really have to work on. So we are responsible for 36% of the world's energy consumption and also 40% of the total direct and indirect carbon emissions. And we can't just count the direct consequences, it's also the indirect emissions. So 11 years ago, we entered into a collaboration called Powerhouse. And I'm going to show you a project example of that first, as a practical example on how architects can contribute and also change the mindset in the building industry. And this was in 2011 when the passive house standard had just appeared in Norway, and we said, well, okay, passive house, that's challenging, but what about doing plus energy houses? You know, why be confident just with passive house? We should actually make renewable energy producing buildings of itself. And we, of course, understood pretty quickly, even from being architects, that we couldn't do this alone. We had to collaborate. And it was then a partnership was established with all of the different parts of the value chain within the industry. And that was important. We had to work throughout the whole industry chain to actually set so high, ambitious sustainability targets. Because the entrepreneur, the building owner, the actual tenant of the building or the user of the building, the engineering competence and the architect had to do this together. And we didn't know how we're going to perform and do a plus energy building at that time, but we just agreed that was our target. And in order to do so, we had to find new ways of working together and to collaborate. And we had to understand we needed to bring everybody around the table from day one. So we needed to front load a lot of the expertise and a lot of the working together from what was traditional at that time. So we needed to bring everybody around the table, even the operator and the entrepreneur, before the architect had made any sketch on the table. And we needed also to let that happen, to have a clear ambition. We were going for a plus energy building. We needed to have an agreement within that leadership and the way of driving all the organizations towards that goal. And we had to do a lot of thorough work in persuading all the authorities on, you know, we're coming with something which you haven't seen yet, but it's better than what you have in your technical expectations. And that's a challenge, right? So when you have a better performance in your project than what's required, you have to apply for a change. And you have to then show that this is as good as what the authorities expect to see. And I'm going to show that through some practical examples. In the powerhouse definition, we have updated it now, not just being about plus energy buildings, but also being about the carbon calculations in every project. And we have based that definition on the Paris Agreement and the IPCC report, which, you know, tells us we cannot use more carbon than what the Earth can tolerate to be within the 1.5 degree agreement. And that means that we've made a carbon reduction budget, which states 2010 as a reference. That's where we could have 100% of our budgeted carbon emissions, and we need to lower it towards zero and ultimately also below zero, having a negative result. And then we still do the plus energy element in producing renewable energy integrated onto the building itself. And as you can see, the reduction curve, the Paris carbon reduction curve, is pretty steep. And it means that we can't copy what we did yesterday or last year. We actually need to find new measures of reducing the carbon emission of the building and the construction itself. And we need then to also bring in all the calculations, the full life cycle, the cradle-to-cradle perspective of every building. So all the materials, all the transport of the materials, the construction, the operations, and fundamentally also the afterlife of the building. And that's where, for instance, design for disassembly comes in. We need to make sure that everything that we use in that building and the construction site can be reusable afterwards as well. And we looked into different ways of doing that, but needs to be reinvented for every new project. We need to bring in the expertise that we already have, and we need to find the new measures on how we can lower the carbon emissions. And reuse and rehabilitation of existing buildings still have the best carbon emission budgets. So in our processes, we make sure then that it's not just about cost, time, and quality that we look into and agree upon, but it's also on every part of the discussion, the carbon calculations. So we need to bring that into the discussion as well, and we need to have the full overview and full measurements of the consequences of all of our projects. We've finalized already 4 built projects, and they are a little bit different in scale. Some of them are new built office building, there's a school, and it's a refurbishment of an existing building, which is the first powerhouse project that we did. It was opened now close to 10 years ago in 2014, and it was a full renovation of 5 cubes, small black cubes, we would say, from an architectural perspective, outside of Sandvika. And we couldn't change the appearance of these buildings. We had to work with what was there already, but still, it's a full refurbishment of the building. And we were successful in reducing the energy need of the building itself, and we reduced it by 90%. And it's a little bit sad that, buildings from the 80s needed to be fully renovated, and you could actually lower the energy consumption of the building by 90% in the 20s. So it's a full rehabilitation. We've changed the facade, had new larger windows instead of the black faded windows that were there. So we optimized the daylight into the building. And this is the before picture of what it looked like inside. It had a technical ceiling and was quite dark, needed a lot of electricity and light. And we ripped everything out and made sure that we had an optimized integrated energy design in the building. We reused all the glass facades into partition walls and the offices and meeting rooms. And most importantly, we have a hybrid ventilation system where we make sure that there are no shafts inside of the building. There's no technical ceiling, because we've used the passive solutions of having thermal mass as a chiller and heater of the space itself. And we used existing openings in the building, like the internal stair, as a ventilation shaft, because the air comes out on a very low speed, and it just warms up with the heated air inside of the building and lifts throughout the building, a typical physical way of how heated air moves. So trying to use the active and the passive understanding on solutions have been critical, and the collaboration in between the different disciplines has been critical in integration of solutions in the design of this building. And the learnings from the Kjørbo project we brought into the new project as well, in making sure that you can minimize the energy demand of every building, you can produce renewable energy on site, you can have electricity through solar panels, and you can have all the thermal energy through geothermal wells or warm pumps from the fjord. But we have to make sure we find new ways, so lowering the carbon emissions through design for disassembly or finding flexible use of a space and building less square meters than what we need. And in that hunt for the carbon reduction, we have also worked with different distributors and producers of materials, asking them the question, so what are the carbon figures that you have in your material and your product? And through that questioning and investigations with the producers, we've also seen that we can, as architects, engage in finding new materials. So in the recent years, we worked really closely with the industry to find low carbon emission materials and try to innovate within that field as well. And one example is a project and product that we are currently developing called Biocrete, where we make wooden burnt coal in the concrete, and that obtains carbon. So the carbon, the coal from the wooden part stores the carbon in the concrete. We've also used recycled elements in making tiles, and we have then used recycled electrical waste from the electrical industry, like microwave ovens and so on, and mix that into new glass tiles in a series. And we've also looked for organic materials, here with an example of a mushroom acoustic element. So fungi, which is grown into an acoustic element and works brilliantly acoustically. So looking for new potential in materials has also been an important part of our investigation and engagement within the construction industry. We also work with a lot of different scaled projects, so not just buildings and construction sites and materials, but also large-scale projects. And one of these are a former slaughterhouse area in Milan, in Italy, where we won a competition within the C40 program, where we are finding a whole new neighborhood based on the existing site and the existing buildings which are there, but then finding a new way of transforming that. And in the project proposal that we're currently working in the master plan of, we've chosen to let all the original construction and the slaughterhouse elements, keep it on the site and use that as part of the park design and the landscape design, and bringing that into planting trees, letting nature take over these existing construction parts. And through that also finding a tree planting program which then can store carbon emission and create a ultimately negative carbon calculation onto the site. So using those existing structures and finding new ways of thinking through a programming of those has been a driving identity and element of the project in Milan. Here in Oslo, we currently have a building site which is close to finalization. It's the Værdal project up in Værdal, which is the first 000 project in Norway, and it's a project which has natural climatization. It's a high-rise, and it's a mixed-use program of housing and offices, and just a service program on the lower side. And that has also been part of an innovative approach in working thoroughly together with the partners in the project and understanding how can we shape a building based on that local climate, which can be naturally climatized, and how can we, through the parametric design and the transdisciplinary collaboration with partners, really create a new way of thinking. And not having ventilation shafts or active systems within your building, but only smart hatches in the facade which can open and bring fresh air in. And it's done through that parametric design approach and making angles on the building which drives the air through the building, and making all the facade elements also thoroughly designed to reach that approach. And it's a wooden building with a concrete structure inside for the thermal mass and the passive elements of heating and chilling the building, as I told you about, with the powerhouse expertise as well. It's finalized in late fall this year, and we're looking forward to seeing the actual measurements of the building. And through that project, we've also collaborated really closely with the other parties in a technology, process, and people-driven mindset. And that has been good learnings for us that we will bring into our next projects, making sure that we can actively work together with digital tools and understand everybody's perspective and making that change towards sustainability. Thank you.
Thank you. I get inspired by hearing you talk, and also you make me sort of want to move to Oslo, because that house was super cool, right? In the intro for this speech, you posed the question, can architects step into the breach to create a more sustainable architecture? My question to you is, are they?
I would say yes, they are. As architects, we are in that position of actually bridging the gap in between the different parts of the value chain within the construction industry. And I experience that architects are taking that position and leading the way.
So sustainability is at the front of the collaboration and also in the BIM use, that's where it comes in super handy?
Yes.
Okay. You will also be a part of our discussion later on with the other guests.